I am downstairs in the Southern Theater with Natalie Clein, who is on a 5-hour jet lag and just finished with rehearsal. Welcome to Columbus.
It's great to be here. I'm really happy.
So glad you could come.
Yeah.
Reading about the cello concerto you're playing, what fascinates me as much as the music is the climate in which it was written. There was just so much going on in Shostakovich's life at that point, and he was having, you know, he wants to stay true to his artistic self, but he's battling constantly with the powers that be.
Exactly, and that's I do think that's why this is such a powerful piece, both to play and to listen to. There's this kind of internal energy, this internal tension and beauty, and then anger and a whole gamut of emotions that I can imagine a deep thinking, sensitive person like Shostakovich might have felt in exactly this climate that you describe, which was dangerous, which was repressed artistically and politically.
As you have lived with this piece, and I'm sure you've been playing it for a long time, how is it changing for you as you are maybe learning a little bit more or beginning to understand a little bit more what Shostakovich must have been going through?
Yeah, this is the beauty of music generally. I think that different aspects of the score and different aspects of the musical expression come out at different moments in your life. So when I was younger and I played it, perhaps the kind of the burning energy and the desire for this kind of furious virtuosity was the thing that fascinated me most. And as I get older and jet lagged, I think I'm one layer deeper with perhaps with the understanding of the limitations of what's possible as a human and what you try to break free from. I've never been one that's very good with adhering to rules.
Excellent.
And that's perhaps comes out very strongly in my interpretation at the moment, this sense of battling against anything that's unjust or battling against something that seems like a power that's bigger than a human soul.
Is there a passage in particular that maybe demonstrates this?
Everything. I mean, right from the moment the piece starts, it's also so individual. He's spelling out his name. We from the seventh quartet where we hear. Those are his words. Those are his letters that spell out his name. D, N, C, M, B, D, H, C, S, which it spells out his name in notes. We've got an inversion of that right from the beginning, so he's really stating that he is himself. He's here as a human being on this earth. He has a right to be here, and it's going to. So we have this, the winds behind, kind of with energy and perhaps some kind of furious anger that's first under the lid and then bursts out furiously when we get a few lines down in the music. So yeah, there's this incredible inner electrical tension right from the beginning. But I mean, it's all over. I mean, a great example actually of his aggression towards the state and his wish to break free from it comes in the last movement. There's a folk song. I think it's a folk song called Suliko, a Russian song, and apparently was one of Stalin's favorites. And Shostakovich is quoting this in a very ironic kind of one finger up way in the last movement. So we start and then we go something like that. But that's exactly a moment where he's saying, I'm against you. I have just as much power in my art as you have politically. And probably Stalin didn't notice that he was doing this. That's how I choose to interpret it, that he didn't really notice, but the musically minded, the culturally minded people could hear that he was against what he had to write for.
I think it's amazing to me and to many people in some ways that someone like Stalin could be so cowed by someone who wrote music more so maybe than the people who were standing on the street corners shouting protests, because he could drag them away one at a time. But I guess dragging Shostakovich away would have maybe caused an uproar in the public that he wasn't ready to deal with. I don't know.
Well, he famously did repress artists, and they did go into hiding. Somebody like Solzhenitsyn is a good example of that, the writer. Shostakovich was on the edge always. So he was taken in by the authorities, he was questioned, and then he managed somehow to get back into the public eye in a way which worked for him. Yeah, I think you're right. I think to assassinate him in the way that millions were would have perhaps been politically the wrong move. It's also very interesting that music was such a powerful tool in that way, and that the authorities understood the power of music and the hunger for it, kind of the greater society. I find that invigorating, and
which forced Shostakovich to really, at least publicly, alter the style of writing and everything. He'd write things and shove them in drawers, I guess, to kind of get it out of himself.
Exactly. I don't think Stalin was the most sophisticated of listeners, as I say. So I think that's how Shostakovich managed to be true to himself with a kind of integrity, where perhaps he was weeping for his life and his lack of freedom and his, I would say, later years depression that probably came from a mixture of repression and fear, and I don't know. And at the same time, perhaps making it sound to an uneducated ear that he was weeping for something about his mother country. So somehow it worked to, I understand it as that he tricked the authorities at certain moments and made them think they were listening to something they weren't.
Use their own lack of sophistication against them.
Exactly that, yeah.
He really thought, I guess at one point Stalin dispatched him to the United States as an emissary, and Shostakovich feared that when he went back that it would be to his own demise, that they would kill him.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, he was forced at one point publicly to proclaim his support for the state, and there's a shocking video, I don't know if you've seen it, where he's physically trembling. You can tell that he's been absolutely pushed, probably almost at gunpoint, to recite this text. So in a way, you know, they're trying to say, we've won, we can control our geniuses and let them work for us. And yeah, I mean, people like Shostakovich, people like Rostropovich, people like Solzhenitsyn, they were very important figureheads for the country. And I mean, of course, there were so many incredible musicians, composers, writers, artists, dancers that came out of this era of Russia. And also, you know, one has to say probably the climate there forced a kind of inner ambition that has created this so many works of genius.
Along with this, really the edgy parts of this, the parts where he's really railing against the system, there are some gorgeous and lyrical moments. Can you give us a little taste of a couple of those?
Well, I mean, there are simple moments where he's, for example, the slow movement. It begins after a very heartfelt, rich introduction by the orchestra. We get a very simple, as you see, almost folk-like nursery rhyme melody between the cellos, with a kind of winding inner line of the violas, and the cello is really which is haunting, and it comes back in a very haunting way later in harmonics, which is a special effect that is kind of ghost-like and eerie and white or grey or something very empty. Like that later. And then in the middle we have an extremely emotional, heartfelt, human outpouring of memory, of tenderness, and then of the climax is one of the kind of the greatest climaxes I know in any cello concerto, where the cello is literally screaming at the top of its voice, and then the orchestra come in complete desperation. It's one of the pieces which I really feel in my throat as I'm playing. Yeah.
That's the thing I was going to comment on, is that as you're playing some of these passages, I see you almost experiencing what was going on in his mind as you play it. It obviously it's very, very close to the surface.
Yeah, I mean, that's just how I play. People always say that everything comes out in my face, which I don't particularly love, but I can't help. It's just me. I've given up trying to change it. So it's just, I guess some people like it.
Well, Natalie, we really appreciate you taking a few moments of
Yeah.
your time and giving us the gift of this beautiful piece. There are two performances coming up. It's Saturday night, 5:30 at the Worthington United Methodist Church, and then Sunday evening at 7 o'clock here at the beautiful Southern Theater.